better if I share my screen because
Sure.
I'm going to skip through them quite fast, particularly given the level of expertise here.
Fantastic.
Right. And I'm going to share not in presenter mode, but I'll make it as big as possible.
No problem. So
Next.
I'm going to let
and
Katherine introduce herself because you have many hats and you've done so many things over the past few years. So go right ahead. She's actually at COP26 now. So she's going to do a very brief presentation and then run back.
Oh, I wish I could be there with you. It's certainly warmer, and I think the community is really quite dynamic. So I'm really pleased to be joining you, Kathy, and everyone. As Kathy indicated, I'm coming you from COP26. I'm actually a former Canadian diplomat on climate change. I started in the very early days in The Hague, basically, and represented Canada in Washington, D.C. in 2000 when we thought Al Gore was going to be president and that the climate change agenda was going to take off. And here we are 20 years later. And I'm back at COP, but this time on behalf of Open Earth Foundation and the Social Alpha Foundation. And what I'd like to just talk about just generally and then go more specifically is on how blockchain is really starting to grow into its own in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals and climate change. And basically, when I look back on the Sustainable Development Goals, I don't look back just to the fact that we're halfway to 2030. I look back to the fact that we've been talking about sustainable development and climate since Agenda 21 in Rio in 1992. So we have had actually a very long evolution of trying to reach sustainable development goals and climate change and basically address the climate change negotiations and rising emissions. And so from my perspective, what I've spent a lot of time addressing is, what are the gaps? What are the issues within the evolution of the solution space and even in technology in that time frame? And what I've come up with is a framework that I use across the organizations and projects that I work with. And that is that we have solutions that are replicative, they're built out in silos. There's been credibility issues with the Sustainable Development Goals in terms of where the funding is going towards, where the efficiency is, the fact that there is duplication. There's a misaligned incentives, sort of a winner-take-all approach to procurement or to pitching solutions, and massive infrastructure gaps, particularly in developing countries, where normally we were talking about massive projects to address energy and other types of core human needs. And so this is how I started examining the role of blockchain, because the financing and solution space for SDGs and climate is basically spoken about in terms of this opportunity gap. And on the surface, it looks like a great, market opportunity, but it's framed as such particularly now for technological solutions. And this promise of revolution, as if tech can be plugged and played, as if we're at that readiness level with data, with governance, with infrastructure, and even the integration of legacy systems. And so this is where I've sort of start from my own build and criticism is actually we're not there. What we have instead is a very fragmented approach to blockchain and sustainable development and climate, and that we're building out in these separate tracks where we have green finance kind of in the middle with not a lot around the digitalization in terms of the end-to-end approach. And then on the right-hand side, we have fintech coming out of the financial sector, and this is largely going towards that narrative of the fourth industrial revolution and banking the unbanked. And then on the other side, we have the emerging tech for sustainable development relating to supply chain, conservation, monitoring, reporting, and verification, and even donation tracking. And when I worked with the Green Digital Finance Alliance, which was set up by Ant Financial and UNEP, Ant Financial had this massive project called Ant Forest. And what we realized, you scratch the surface and realize they're using gamification for users to grow virtual trees and track their carbon footprinting. But this had nothing to do, there was no integration into the financing of the reforestation projects or in terms of the monitoring, reporting, and verification. There was no integration. So it was the perfect example of this type of siloed tracks that we have in the space. And this is where I start thinking about, okay, core attributes, we know what those core attributes are: the accessibility, the security, the transparency, the accountability. And the fact that actually maybe there is a space for this within the SDG and climate space, but it comes not from blockchain in and of itself. It doesn't come from digital currencies in and of itself. It doesn't come from digital assets. What we have is this evolution of this space where we go from digital currencies. We had a bit of a detour into the ICOs, which actually did not help our credibility in some of the conservation and climate spaces. Then we have the digital assets, the capacity to represent and transact these assets. But the whole trust, the MRV and the finance has to be built on this verified data. And that is where that integration comes in: the GIS, the satellite, the biometrics, the sensors. It's the collaboration as well, which is essential here. And that's what's been missing in the space in terms of the culture of innovation. And that's what largely I've been pushing towards. So by being able to integrate that as well as focus on collaboration, we do see the capacity for blockchain for SDGs, ESGs, and climate. But again, they're not scaling out because of the culture of innovation. If I look at the Climate Change Coalition, for example, which was set up with the UNFCCC and blockchain providers around the world, you have these massive clusters of pilots and use cases, but very few are scaling up, very few are integrating. And that's again because the culture of innovation, the way that we're incentivized, the way that we're competing for financing, for airtime even, and also, of course, the blockchain infrastructure that's being used. So again, what we're doing is replicating all of those issues that we saw early on in the landscape: the silos, the credibility issues, the efficiency challenges, and the infrastructure gap. So how do we address this? What became the core question. And then I started building out with blockchain labs for open collaboration. We created biofuel or a fuel tracking system for sulfur. And then I met with Martin Weinstein from Yale Open Labs, and he started building out Open Earth Foundation. And we had the same vision that we have climate solution fragmentation and the technology sector on the one side, and then the climate sector on the other. And again, these gaps in the middle. So how can we actually work together to do this? Well, to solve for this, we decided on a complex systems perspective at the global level that can still reach and integrate very localized and legacy initiatives using emerging tech and, of course, collaboration and open platforms. And what we have then is a sort of an umbrella organization, a foundation with various tracks and pillars and projects underneath this that all will be integrated, are integrating. So we have finance, we have open climate, we have nested climate accounting, all sort of integrating within our business model. So on the one hand, for the UNFCCC, that's nation state level. The count towards Paris is done at the national level. So that means that subnational actors or even international actors are not part of the accounting system for that. So that's one of the first problems that we're trying to solve, is how can we actually approach this fragmented reporting infrastructure that is supposed to happen starting this year, actually. So we are creating this nested climate accounting integrated system so that we can actually include those actors at the subnational level, that they can actually continue to do their initiatives and yet still also report up in through the national reporting schemes. This is more complex and could take a whole presentation in and of itself. But what this means practically is that use cases can actually start feeding into this. And we have one with British Columbia, the province of British Columbia, where the mining industry and the government are working together to have better tracking and tracing within their supply chains. At the same time and in parallel, we can integrate that into the global climate accounting framework. So it serves two purposes. There is a video I'll share with you, and you can go and look into this. It was created for COP, and it's pretty cool. The other thing we can do is linked digital green bonds. So we can aggregate these small energy projects and whatnot using blockchain. And we can actually go beyond just aggregating new projects to actually linking into gender and climate projects on the ground. And this chapter, as well as a few others, are actually now available in the BIS Project Genesis reports that were released this week. And this is also revolutionary because it's about the integration and scaling of initiatives that are existing or that can be built out with relative ease. The other use case that I wanted to highlight, which has already been mentioned, is the NFTs. We at Open Earth and Social Alpha Foundation are able to do what we do because we are harnessing new financing capacities through NFTs. And we had Carbon Drop in March, which integrated amazing donation of artwork from Beeple, from Refik Anadol and others to raise money for Open Earth for the work we're doing. And largely because of Beeple and Refik Anadol, we managed to raise $6.6 million, which has now gone into an endowment, which we are using to build out all of those initiatives and projects. We have another upcoming one called Ocean Drop, which is just being launched now, and the auction will take place in December. And to me, this has a natural integration with the European mandate on Bauhaus of the Sea, for example. So I see real potential there. But again, it's untested. This is very new, and it all depends on integrating different types of communities. We have to attract the funders, the ones who want to purchase the NFTs in order to actually garner that type of investment and donation. So basically, this is the model for Ocean Drop that we hope will work. And we're seeing this type of business model being built out. But again, time will tell how successful we are in terms of the fundraising capacity there, and also the climate impact that it has. So those are just a few examples. And the final one I'll leave you with is we are now, because of that endowment, able to be working directly with the UNFCCC on its new Global Innovation Hub. And this is a hub that is going to go beyond the white, bow, green and the marketplaces that are currently out there that matchmake solutions with demand. Instead, it's looking at core human needs and using a digital platform that we're building out and donating to the hub, basically, to say, let's actually examine those needs. And instead of saying you need electric cars and smart solutions for that, let's look at what the core transport and shipping needs are on the ground, and then look at alternative solutions and identify gaps so that we can put out challenges and fund those. So that's basically what we're releasing this week. And you can follow those initiatives here at COP online at the website there. So that's just a taste of what we're currently working on. We're a small team of 5 core, and then a few others that are now joining, and we're scaling up rapidly and really looking forward to collaborating and working with you. I'll leave it there. Thank you.